Welcome to the second video in the School Garden series. My name is Danielle Anderson. I'm a food systems dietitian and education consultant and a certified school garden educator. Each video in this series is intended to provide a foundation for garden programming and give you the best shot at creating a fruitful, functional garden space. In the last presentation, we focused on the many reasons to garden. We connected school garden programming to local wellness policy, social emotional learning and behavior management, and we discussed how gardens are the perfect outdoor learning space to provide an understanding of our food system, where our food comes from, where it goes, and who is involved. We also looked at the importance of environmental stewardship, how to grow food responsibly while protecting our natural resources. We know that school and community gardens can be used in many ways. This presentation is meant to provide guidance around planning for a garden space or garden program and to determine what is important for your site. There are numerous considerations and discussions to be had before breaking ground and then regularly after gardens are planted. Part 3 will provide a growing guide highlighting growing zones, seasons, and planting calendars with specifics around growing in Maricopa County. And Part 4 will provide general planting techniques and best practices for maintaining a functional garden. Let's begin with some guiding questions. What types of goals, participation, or activities will your garden emphasize? Take a moment to let the questions fill and then pause the recording and read out each question. In this presentation, we will look at how all of these questions can be answered. We will identify the role of the garden coordinator as well as the importance of building a garden committee. We will look at some common pitfalls when establishing a garden, and we will also talk about the types of planning and culture building that ideally should occur prior to breaking ground. Lastly, we will look at program sustainability as an overall guiding factor. Sustainability is essential to consider before starting your garden, and the only way to ensure a garden sustainability is to front-load the planning and build a cohesive group of garden advocates to share in decision making. The garden coordinator role can be a worthwhile investment to any garden programming. The position is often responsible for leading communication between garden activities and the site as a whole. They can help establish and lead garden committee meetings. They often create committee meeting agendas and share meeting notes that are then accessible for interested parties. They are the garden's biggest cheerleader. They share out what's happening in the garden. They make efforts to create an inclusive garden environment by inviting representation from across the site. And they are often in charge of organizing volunteers for garden events, regular maintenance, and activities. University students from nutrition and dietetics, public health, sustainability, and food systems programs, as well as Master Gardener programs, have a continuous influx of folks looking for volunteer hours. Sometimes it's just a matter of connecting with the internship and program directors to create a mutually beneficial relationship. It is important to mention that sometimes a garden coordinator can come after a garden is already physically in place, once it's basically been realized how much work is required to maintain a functional garden. Depending on the site, this could be a paid position. However, in many schools in Arizona, the responsibilities of the garden coordinator are often absorbed by other school staff, and community gardens are often run by volunteer coordinators. And while a garden coordinator can be a great asset to any garden programming, it is not necessarily required for success if there is a functioning garden committee. But before we talk about the foundation of a successful garden, that being the garden committee, it is important to touch on an unfortunate and common pitfall. The one-man band can be the result of one very committed, passionate employee or volunteer who takes on every aspect of garden planning, maintenance, and responsibility. And while it may appear that having one person be the go-to for everything garden related can make sense, there are a couple of reasons why this is not suggested. Consider burnout. Planning, building, planting, weeding, irrigation, harvesting are just some of the responsibilities required for regular garden maintenance. When we add in the actual use of the garden, any sort of lessons and scheduling, it can be easy to see how a lot of this cannot fall on just one person. There are too many personal anecdotes centering on one person spending evenings and weekends doing everything in the garden. This is simply not sustainable. 2, consider what happens to the garden when this person moves on or is transferred to a different site. This happens so often that it is more common to see unused garden beds than it is to come across fully functioning and flourishing garden sites. All because someone was at one point heavily invested, but then they left without any sort of sustainability plan in place. Also, it's essential to consider how if one person makes all of the decisions, who does the garden actually belong to? Unintentionally, the go-to garden person can inadvertently transition a site garden into their own individual garden with their plans and their rules. And if this is a school or community garden, the result can leave others feeling as though they can't use the garden and/or they have no actual buy-in to the garden concept as a whole. Lastly, consider a garden's goals. Discussing what types of activities and uses the garden will have allows for creative flexibility that can change and grow year to year. Maybe there's a parent who is great with irrigation. Maybe a science teacher wants to share some lesson ideas during professional development. Maybe a community member knows how to compost and wants to help set up a program to reduce food waste. This all could be unattainable if it's in just the hands of one person. And that is why the garden committee is so important. One major advantage that comes from a garden committee is shared decision making. Discussing what types of activities and uses the garden will have allows for that creative flexibility. Not only does group consensus require the buy-in we discussed earlier, it provides more hands to tackle the responsibilities of garden maintenance and provides an automatic sustainability component in case someone leaves. It offers an opportunity for new ideas and shared expertise. Ideally, the garden committee includes representation from teaching staff, administration, child nutrition, parents, community members, and students. And everyone participating should feel as though their opinion and ideas are heard. A garden committee should meet regularly and stay in communication between meetings. Meeting agendas and meeting minutes should be housed somewhere that is accessible for all interested parties, and this includes a space for ongoing discussion. From the very beginning, a clear direction, answering all of those questions from early on in this presentation, should be determined. This enables ease with regular planning and garden use. A garden committee is responsible for creating and maintaining a garden culture. There should be clear responsibilities connected to the predetermined direction that was established, including the roles, garden use, and procedures. Consider how each member will regularly contribute and consider what is reasonable to tackle each season, understanding that what was once planned may be subject to change. If COVID taught us anything, it is to always have a backup plan in place and be flexible to change. Lastly, think of a garden committee as a real-life representation of a living document. Committee members will come and go, and so it is essential to regularly seek out new representation and new energy. Not only will this help maintain sustainability efforts, but it enables a garden site to grow with new ideas as new members bring with them unique perspectives and experiences. When we talk about the importance of a garden committee, what we are really talking about is setting up the foundation for a garden culture. Garden planning and creating a garden culture go hand in hand. Establishing short-term and long-term goals, as well as the incremental steps to achieve these goals, are what are simultaneously creating a garden culture. These activities are what make up the norms, the regular use, and maintenance tasks required to keep a garden going and growing. Designed with school gardens in mind, the green tool illustrates a well-integrated garden. It encompasses 19 different components or boxes with arrows indicating direction and shaded rings indicating level of integration. This tool can be found on the companion resource sheet for the video. There are 4 domains that enable integration and eventual sustainability within garden programming. Adequate resources and support are essential to the foundation of any garden program or site. Size, capacity, and use means that each type of garden has different financial needs. These same needs are also dependent on the years of operation. If a garden is in the creation or building phase, startup costs will likely be much higher than annual maintenance costs. Operating budgets are also influenced by any garden positions attached to an individual site. The physical garden not only considers the space a garden exists in, it includes what all is needed to maintain that garden space. And again, this varies garden to garden. Regular garden maintenance can seem overwhelming when a garden is first built, but this is where a garden committee can help establish roles and routines to make it easier. The student or community experience is really the focal point to why gardens are built in the first place. Answering those early questions and establishing the major uses for the garden is key to any garden program. Who will participate? What roles and responsibilities exist for each participant? Can garden activities teach to curriculum standards in a new and unique way? Will participants learn how to harvest and prepare fruits and vegetables? Will garden experiences increase fruit and vegetable consumption? And what is the garden providing for participants? What makes it special? All of the answers to these questions create an experience for a student or community member. Lastly, the green tool indicates that a school and community garden is fully integrated when the values of the garden are realized, when the community is involved, and when there are a variety of activities, opportunities to participate regularly in. Here you see 100 ways to connect learning to the garden by LifeLab and Slow Food USA. The link to this model for garden integration can be found in the companion resource sheet. But what you see shown here is a more school garden specific way to incorporate varying subjects and standards into the planning process. And while we already know from the first video that there are so many other benefits outside of curriculum immersion and attending to state standards where school gardens can find their fit, meeting curriculum needs often becomes the go-to path for program inclusion. And this is why varied representation, both grade level and subject matter throughout a site is worthwhile on garden committees. As stated earlier, creating a garden culture is really part of garden planning. It's what happens when we establish a set of shared practices and regular features available at a site and garden. Is it welcoming? Is it comfortable? Is it accessible? Is it manageable? Is it celebrated? Altogether, these individual pieces come together for a complete puzzle. When we're welcoming people to the garden, you can do that in many ways. Art, signage, reseeding annuals, a little free library, perennial borders. When you're talking comfort, is there gathering areas? Is there shade? Is there water accessible? And then when we're talking about accessibility, is it serving the need of multiple users? Do people know how and when to access the space? Are there clearly marked paths? In terms of manageability, are you planting with a purpose? Are you taking care of weeds and water and pests and planting? And are supply sheds clearly marked and accessible? Are roles and policies clearly established? Lastly, in terms of celebration, you always want to be telling your story. Using newsletters, signage, teachers' lounge posters, staff meetings, social media, local press, school morning bulletins, school board, PTO, PTA, the web page, listings on school sites. This is all ways to get and share information that is happening in the garden. Before we move into sustainability, we haven't spoken much about how to prep or plan for the actual physical location and beds in a garden. The 4th video in this series will go much deeper into planting techniques, discussing bed and soil preparation, irrigation, and selecting which types of plants to include. But since this presentation is about understanding what all is needed before you break ground, setting your physical garden up is a critical piece to consider during the planning process. These 10 steps are from the 10 Steps to a Successful Vegetable Garden by the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension, and the resource with full descriptions can be found on the companion resource sheet. Additionally, the U of A planting calendar can also be found on the companion resource sheet. Sustainability in general is all about maintaining and lasting with the future in mind. Both aspects should be considered with any garden program. Garden sustainability can also refer to other aspects of programming to include regular practices of learning and work, garden events and celebrations, local business support, funding, and volunteer and/or parent involvement. Referring back to slides 7 through 10, there are countless opportunities to be grown with every planted garden bed. But every garden program should include sustainability goals around maintaining a multifunctional garden space that incorporates so many different activities and uses. It moves garden programming to the forefront of any school or community area, providing a unique set of opportunities for participants and keeping them coming back again and again. Hopefully, this presentation provided ample guidance on the types of discussions and preparation that should occur prior to breaking ground. All resources are either linked below in the description or on the companion blog post, depending on how you are accessing this video. Part 3 provides a growing guide looking at how growing zones and seasons can be navigated in a garden program. Be sure to check that one out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.